Welcome to this conversation. We will talk about how media can tell powerful stories about refugees, about victims of crime or war, but at the same time do it with respect and showing them as people with agency and power. We will discuss this fine balance. And with me I have Purity. You are a participant of this year's Refugee Speakers program. You are a trans activist. Oh, this will take long because you have so many things that I want to tell about you. You're a musical poet. And you're also an executive director at Queerstone Media. We'll talk more about that. And right now, among other things, there's a documentary made about you called Purity. We'll talk about that also. And then we have Erik Larsson. You're head of Reporters Without Borders, our dear neighbors here. Yes. You will talk about your work, or what you do. And last but not least, Zdolsek, a photographer, videographer, that's a hard word, at TV4. And actually I will start with you, because you have, we discussed how long it was when you came back from the media mission.
It was 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you returned from Sudan, and you reported about this horrendous refugee crisis that is going on there.
Yeah.
And I want to, you have all these images and all these people you have met. Can you tell us a little bit what you've seen there?
We were in the border area between Chad and Sudan. Right on the border. We never crossed into Sudan, but we were right on the border. The small stream that actually makes out the border between the two countries. And there are just hundreds of thousands of people coming across there. We were there for 1 week, more or less, and we saw tens of thousands of people coming across. And it's a dire situation, as you say. When people come across the river, they come without anything, basically nothing. Just the clothes that they're wearing, nothing else. And then the longer they stay, you can see that these kind of houses, these kind of mats, they show up in the area. So as they move further away from the borderline, like a few hundred meters away to the first temporary camp, you can see that the UNHCR and the UNICEF material, it really makes a difference, and that's like the first line of defense for them. So that's where we started working, and then and we also visited the camp that has been there for 20 years from the last war. So we visited these places and produced 4 stories for TV4 News, a couple of texts, and social media that we also pushed out. So I think we did a good job down there.
I will say you did. Yes, sorry. You did. You really did. It was really strong. And it's also, I was impressed by, we have those pictures of refugee houses, relief housing units, but also the meeting with people, mostly women, and very strong meetings with, when they have lost 5 brothers, they have lost, they have seen terrible things, they have gone through traumas. It must be very hard to have these conversations and doing it in a way that is respectful. But I will say, how do you do that?
How do we do that? first of all, it's just really important for us to explain to them that this is not something that you have to do. It's not mandatory to talk to us because we have made the trip down there and blah blah blah. We want to tell your story. It's your story. It's your agency, and you have to be sure that you want to talk to us. And even though we really try to explain this, no one says no for some reason. Everyone wants to tell their story. And even the worst stories, the stories about sexual violence, maybe not everyone wants to talk about that. It's a big taboo. But after a meeting between the women in one part of the camp, they put up someone that tell the story, that is the representative. So there is always someone who wants to tell you, to share the stories, and I think, I'll stop there. It's difficult, but it's also at the same time it just runs automatically for some reason.
And this is one part of your job, but you also do other things. If you go out in the street of Gothenburg and ask questions.
That's interesting.
What happens then?
If we go out and talk to people here, or try to talk to people, maybe 80% will say no and 20% will say yeah. But down there, even though people are tired, people haven't had a shower for 3 weeks, haven't had anything to eat for 2 days, everyone will say, okay, we will spend the minutes to talk to you and try to explain what we have been through. And then it's just up to me as a photographer and my colleague as a reporter to just do the utmost of that opportunity and really try to give back, for the chance that we have been given.
Thank you. We will come back to that question. I want to hear your thoughts about this. But Purity, I want you to tell a little bit about your, not a little bit, I want to tell you about your story. And also, you have a special perspective being a refugee, quote a refugee, being a person that is very open, that shared your stories, but also actually a person that have lived experience from these houses. Special. Please tell us.
Probably this house is a little bit more sophisticated. It's not almost similar to the ones we were living in. But if I can go back, I was a refugee in Kenya for 5 years, and I lived in one of the refugee camps called Kakuma camp. And when he was speaking about the vulnerability and how everybody wants to tell their story, when I go to the camp, I saw something that I never thought it could actually happen to me. I was running away from Uganda, from transphobia and homophobia, and almost being killed by my father, and I needed a space to process my traumas. But then I was welcomed by a camp where everybody is in tears and in lack and almost wanting somebody to just see them. And so I can agree that when you are in the camp, in those kind of situations, it's not like people are looking forward to having a journalist share their story. No, it's because you ask yourself, is there somebody else who is seeing what exactly I am going through? Does anybody understand the magnitude of pain that I am going through? So that's how most of the refugees are, because you feel like you're going to just die, and probably nobody will ever understand the kind of torture, turmoil you have gone through. So for me, when I was in the camp, first of all, as a trans refugee there, the day I got there, some of the shelters that were given. One of the shelters for trans asylum seekers was burnt down by fellow refugees who are transphobic and homophobic. And
sorry, this is inside the camp where you
inside the camp. And so I was welcomed by the fact that I can actually die in that camp, that somebody can actually put fire over, and there is no security. It's an open space and everything. And so at that point, I didn't know whether I was going to be alive in the next 5 hours, 2 hours, so I was just living for the day to let it pass. And if it passes and I am still alive, I'll be like, well, wow. And I got to a point, and I'm speaking on behalf of so many refugees like me, trans refugees. I got to a point where I actually didn't have anything to lose. If I died, if I told my story, if I talked about everybody that has made me go through that experiences, I didn't have anything to lose. So for me, a journalist coming to me and asking me, tell me your story, I would want to say everything, even when I know whatever I'm saying probably can be used against me. Really, being a refugee is the worst thing that has happened to me. And I don't know if there will be anything else that will happen to me that will make me feel like, oh, this is better than the other. It is just the worst. I was in a refugee camp for over 3 months, and I have never seen hopelessness in one space at the same time, and you don't even know where to turn to and see hope. You know, so, and then sometimes I could even look at journalists and I'm like, oh, well, they are actually quite privileged that they are taking our stories anyway, and probably maybe they will still not understand our pain so deeply, because that's also possible, because journalists are a bit more safer. You know, they have a little bit of more of protection, and it's also possible not to fully understand how the dynamic of being in that situation actually works. So for me, being in that situation is among the worst thing that has happened to me.
It's very strong, your story. Thank you for sharing it. Yeah. I will remember me to ask you about Christian media also. Yeah. But I will turn to you. Erik, can you tell me a bit about Reporters Without Borders? What is the aim of your work?
Reporters Without Borders is an organization who started in 1985, and it started as a French radio journalist who was traveling around the world, and this French journalist discovered that journalists all over the world was more and more threatened. He see that authoritarian regimes was aiming for journalists. So he realized that if the civil society is going to if the civil society wants to survive, we need also independent journalists who's covering the stories, who's telling what's actually is going on. So he started this organization and to support press freedom all over the world. And now we are in 13 different places in the world, and Sweden has a section who's we're having a birthday actually this year, so it's 30 year. we're celebrating 30 year this year in Sweden, for example. In Sweden, so. What we do is that we try to raise questions about press freedom. If some journalists get attacked because they are doing some kind of work, we try to talk about that in public, and we also have a press freedom index, and behind me there's a map of our press freedom index, and there you can see how good the situation is for the media in different countries in the world.
And it's really sad. It's quite alarming when you look at the world.
It's very alarming, and I used to say that for 10 years ago we had 25 countries where press freedom was good. Now, this year, it's 8 countries. It's 0.8% of the world's population who live in a country where press freedom is good. If we look at the worst countries, for 10 years ago, it was 19 countries where the situation was very difficult for media. Now, this year is 36. So it's very alarming tendencies. And this is also linked to what's happening in democracy worldwide, because we can see that the last 15-20 years there has been a backlash for democracy, and according to our opinion is that journalists and media is in the front line of democracy, because if you are a dictator, there's actually a recipe for dictators, and that recipe is that you have to attack the journalists, you have to attack the media first, because if you attack the media, if you don't have any public conversation, nobody can know what's true. Nobody can know what's actually going on, and if you don't have any independent media, then you can go after the NGOs, you can go after UN, because no one will tell you what is happening. So we think that's the main reason why journalists and media is so threatened today.
It's a scary but effective way, I will say.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
And being in Sweden, what is the situation for exiled journalists in Sweden today?
Sweden is and has been for many years been one of the best countries in the world actually for journalists. Now we are in place 3 of 180 countries, and we used to be like 3, 4, 5, etc. That's our position. So it's very good, but it's also very good in Norway and Denmark and the Scandinavian countries. And if we look at the organization and the science who measure democracy, you can see the same development there. Scandinavian countries very good in this. So, but we also see some problem. We have a serious threat against journalists. If we look only at threat and security situation for journalists, Sweden is not that good. So, yeah, we have a lot of hate, and and we're also very concerned about some new laws that might threaten the press freedom here in Sweden. But in overall, it's a good situation for journalists in Sweden.
And before you were the editor-in-chief of the magazine Omvärlden, that was the global, global issues, the main magazine about global issues, I will say. And as a reporter then, an editor-in-chief, did you report, of course, about refugee causes and refugees? And
yes.
What is when you're looking back, when you hear this?
Yes, I've been covering foreign politics, foreign aid for like 15 years now or something like that. And I think the most difficult thing is to when I started to be a journalist, I went out to the field, and then I had this idea. I want to report about this. But then when you are out there, you realize that you can't sit behind a desk and think, I need to do I'm going to cover the situation like this or like that. Because when you are out in the reality, you're going to see that it doesn't, it's not what you thought it was in the beginning. So it took a couple of years to really listen to people and really hear the story, and don't fit it and just not put it this in some story that was already told by my boss or something like that. And I think that's really hard as a journalist and reporter to really listen at people and don't have make up your mind what the story is about before. And I also think that it's very important that you tell a lot of people's stories, because every story is unique, every story is different, and it's very important that you tell many stories, because I mean, there are so many many differences in the world that you want to cover, so it's important for to tell every story.
Thank you. And now I skipped you said tell different stories. There is a risk that refugees are a label. We talk about refugees, we report about refugees, and this is a refugee news piece or something. How can we make sure, and it's for all of you, make sure that we go behind the label, that we see more people?
Can I just a short comment? I think one good idea is not to only tell about the situation for refugees, but also tell about what's happening in the daily life. I mean, what do you eat? How do you fix the food? Which people do you meet? And to show that it's the person is not just a victim. You're so much more than a victim or a refugee or etc. And I think that's the problem for journalists, just not telling the story for refugees. It's for everything, because you have to show many sides of a person.
I think when you come into a refugee camp, many of them look quite the same, just from the outlook of it. And then a challenge as a reporter or as a photographer, and an opportunity as well, is to go steps behind what you see at a first glance. What activities are taking place within the camp? What are you as a refugee organizing to raise your dignity inside the community? And it goes together with what kind of food are you making? How do you take care of your children? Where do you get the water from? There are so many stories tied to activity and agency that you can tell. And it takes time, and it takes a bit of devotion maybe, but it's important that we really do that, of course.
I think this question was probably for the experts, because I'm not a journalist anyway. But I totally agree. I'm glad that you talked about the fact that journalists have to go past just the label and go to our everyday lives and what we do and who we are, what is more to our lives beyond the label, usually. Because like you say, if you come from a perspective of refugees, you already have a conclusion in your mind as a journalist that, okay, refugees are free from war. What happens with them freeing from war? It's like the same kind of narrative that, this has happened and this is happening, and you already have a conclusion in your mind. And for me, from my own perspective, I used to see journalists who come actually with a concept, strict concept actually, that you have to go by. And with that concept, they make you actually say things you wouldn't find actually important for you as a person who is in the situation, but go with the flow, because this is exactly what the journalists want. And I can give you an example, because empathy is quite key when you have to go with an open mind approaching refugees, because you never know the most inspiring story you're going to find in that refugee camp that nobody will ever imagine that story could come out. I can give you an example. I've been approached by journalists before, a big media house, and then they wanted to show my story, and then immediately they told me, "Oh, Purity, we want to come and cover your story, but this is the layout, how we want it. You know, we want to come to your house, and then I want you to be looking at the photos of your childhood, your parents. As we tell your story, we are looking at the photos and memory lane of, you know, how you grew up through the photos." And I told the journalist that I actually don't have the photos. And she went ahead and said, like, "Oh, could you find at least some, like maybe could you find some photos? Any photos actually works. Any photos actually works." And I felt like I really felt like, oh my goodness, I wish she asked me, would you be comfortable sharing the photos? And then I would have told her that I burnt all my childhood photos, I burnt all the family photos, because I didn't want to remember all the memories. Looking at them in my house was haunting me all the time, and I chose to burn all of them. And that actually should have been a story maybe that the journalist should have picked from, you know, but at the end of the day, she actually never did the story, because then the script they had didn't go with mine. So for me, if they go with an open mind, with empathy, and not just with a label, these are refugees and these are expectations. Yeah.
So really strong. I think that was the essence of what we are talking about now. Going behind the label and also not have a format. But I just come to thank you. We have this refugee and we have these horrible situations, but we also have people falling in love, dancing, being happy. You told me before about the importance of joy in the camps. Can you please share it with us, how you did that?
Yeah, so I think I haven't had, the journalists talking about the joy, because they didn't see it. I'm sure that you were so traumatized and probably could not see any joy that comes out of such kind of a situation. But, when you have been in a situation where it's only a sadness, it's not like you are getting used to it, but you devise means of being alive and thriving and resiliently carrying on. I haven't met the most creative, the most people who have solutions to almost all the problems like refugees. Yeah, because every problem you are going through, you think about, if this was done, probably my situation would be better. If I didn't have to, in this situation, what could happen? For example, resettlement. I could tell you that maybe if you ask me, like from a UNHCR perspective, probably you have your format, and ask me like, Purity, if we are, for example, doing quota refugees, what criteria should we use? I would give you the exact tips, because I have been there. I know who is actually the most vulnerable. But then also, you think about, there is so much more to their lives before all that turmoil happened. So we reach a point where the situation is like being sick for a long period of time, or being on a death, in a hospital bed for a year, 2 years, 3 years at the same time. You not only get used to it, but maybe you start even creating a way of singing on your bed. You find strength, and we used to find strength in one. Somebody is like a musician, and just share the joy of, this song, let's actually sing it. And then around that time, probably you are just looking for something very small to boost your energy. And then you could see a lot of creativity to do with art, to do with you fantasize. Like for us trans refugees, I created a program called the Trans Night. Also, when we had left the camp and went to Nairobi, we had to look for a safe house because we weren't safe, like I said, in the camp. And then when we got to a safe house where I could bring all the most vulnerable trans asylum seekers and refugees in one space that is safer, and then when we got in that safe house, we started creating what brings joy to us. What can we do to see our well-being, our mental health being uplifted? And then I created, a trans night where there is fashion. You just dress up the way you want. Everything the world has denied you in that room, you take back the power. Where you think about, you have seen drag queens dancing, and then there are people who have already mastered how that dancing. Literally, probably the trans persons are the most brilliant dancers, and then a whole night is a show. And it could be a show. Every month we were always looking forward to it, literally. I remember one time one official from UNHCR coming, and then she was actually crying when we were actually having fun, and we're like, why are you crying? I thought we invited you to enjoy the fun, because they had given us some little money, and what we did out of it was unbelievable. So going beyond the label, we need to know that refugees are artists, refugees are professionals. I became a refugee when I was already had done my university, so I already had a degree in social sciences, and there is somebody else who is actually maybe a journalist. There is somebody else who is actually a doctor. Who we used to have fair refugees who tell you, you have had a burn or something has happened. Probably by the time you get medication, or maybe you're not going to get medication, and they have tools to do with first aid and stuff like that. But because they have gone in a situation of vulnerability, nobody goes past them going personal, like you said, to know that, before this happened, these were actually human beings. Can we can we always start with the fact that before they became refugees, they were human beings with a career, purpose, with dreams, and what could have been their dreams? And if you begin with that kind of approach, I think it's such a beautiful way to see the perspective and see beyond labels of being a refugee.
Thank you. What do you think when you hear these stories?
This trans night, of course, would be a dream story to tell. But I really I know what you mean when you told about the journalist that you met that had this set format that she wanted to follow. It's so easy as a journalist to get caught in that format. And it's not just about labels. It's also about the space of time when it comes to TV and radio and texts. How many words that you actually have in the media that you get to present the story. And we are quite limited nowadays. The stories we made in Chad, I think we got them stretched to 245, some of them, which is a lot these days. That's a lot. But that limited set of time just makes us stuck in formats that it holds us back as journalists, and it makes your stories not getting told in the shine and glory that they actually deserve, I think. And that is a problem. That's a real problem going forward, I think.
And then I'm really glad that there will be a documentary about you. Can you tell us about this? And also about what's your dream, what you think about this, but also your fears with this film.
Yeah, so there is a documentary in the making that somebody is doing about me called Purity. And well, when this journalist came to Kenya to cover some stories about refugees, and it was for a big media house. So they came to us, but like I said, the other big media house had a format of the story, like you say, you know, what they actually wanted. And so this journalist, after covering that big media house stories, discovered that the story that should have been told is actually not in the big documentary that happened. And though she approached me and told me that, Purity, I would love to do a documentary about your life. So it's a documentary. I don't know how, probably I have forgotten the format, but it's an observational documentary. She doesn't say anything. She just allows us. She follows. She used to follow me and stuff like that. But what happened before I probably tell you why this is actually quite very important, I wish everybody else could be empathetic to look at such kind of formats of documentaries. They really save lives. Is that we had done a documentary with a big media house that I don't want to talk about, and that is the biggest regret of my life with that big media house. Every time I look at that documentary, it has over 4 million views, and I'm like, oh my goodness, wow, why did I actually have to do this? The journalists didn't prepare us of the backlash that would come with it. We were not a part of editing it. We just woke up. We were not sober. Yeah, because they found us in a most vulnerable situation. We were so angry, not sober, tired, and everything in between. Like I said in the beginning, we reached a point where we don't have anything to lose. So if you could find us in that mood of we don't have anything to lose, we would say everything, even the things we shouldn't say. And so after 1 week, we woke up to a documentary, and we were the most hated people probably in East Africa. And it was about trans refugees and asylum seekers. Literally, the Kenyan anti-homosexuality community wanted us, everybody, to look out for us and kill us and take us back to where we came from. Like, how can you export homosexuality from your country, and then you mean we have these homosexuals in this space and stuff like that? And then for me, I had also put in that documentary, mentioned my father is a politician, and at that point he was among the top politicians, and super sensitive for me to be able to mention his name and what he did to me and stuff like that. And I woke up to everybody looking out for me, and in the Ugandan media, instead of people focusing on my vulnerability, focusing on my father's career that I'm killing politically, somebody who has a refugee, no, a trans child. And that hurt me. We never had a chance to, our shelter, like I told, where we had the trans nights, literally the neighbors came and actually attacked us, and that night we were like beaten and almost like lynched, and we were stuck with ourselves, you know. And until now I have never heard about the journalists and stuff like that, because they did whatever they did. And so this journalist Susie reached out to me and told me, Purity, your story and a story of every trans person in this space needs to be told, but nobody should be telling their story. We should be listening. And so she gave me the reason why she came at a time where I didn't have any confidence in journalists, but then she also came from a perspective of her knowing about trans rights, telling me about what the impact could be. in the future you might not see, because I was too vulnerable to even see the future of this documentary. Really, there are moments where I could actually, there's a time she was filming me when I was being arrested by the Kenyan police, and that day later on when we got out, I told her, please, can you leave? I no longer want to be on camera. This is actually not funny. And she left and came back and then kept explaining to me that maybe in the future, when you look at all this, probably somebody else will find inspiration out of this organic way of living. And then the last one is the fact that the joy I have talked about is just within that documentary. You will see, you would cry, at the same time actually have a lot of joy and go home feeling like, oh wow, there is resilience that is beyond what people go through. So I can't wait for it to go out. So she's been following me, but then again, because she's an individual documentalist, she has not gotten enough money to finish the documentary. Instead, where she has always gone to look for money to finish the documentary, they want to do the documentary by themselves. I have been approached by media houses in Sweden. I don't want to mention them because these are journalists that probably work in those media houses that don't want to be in trouble. And they're like, well, Purity, would love actually to tell your story and cover your documentary. And I'm like, but somebody else is doing the documentary. Like, maybe, probably we shall do it a little bit different. And so, and then even the ones that she has gotten that wants to give her money wants like a documentary of 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But this is a material that she has been covering for over 6 years now, still on the journey. Now she's reaching a success story. I'm going to say this last one because this is very important to me. I get excited when I talk about this. You know, she told me when I was in Kenya, coming to Sweden, because like I said, I didn't have like any hope of like ever becoming something better than the suffering that I was in. And I was like, but when will this documentary of yours actually come out? And she was like, yeah, Purity, when something mega happens to you, it will come out. And I was like, but there is nothing mega important that will ever come out of my life. So probably wait for the rest of your life, maybe when I have died, and you still have these materials with you in your camera. But recently, I am having a baby with another trans person. So my partner and I are pregnant, and this is a trans woman and a trans man having a baby. It is still unbelievable that actually that is happening to me. Yeah, I get chills. It is something that I never looked forward to, and ever feeling like, oh my gosh, finally I'm going to have a family and start my own family tree. I mean, like, I was banished by my entire family, so I don't have nobody like from all the relatives to go to. So now I am having a family. I am in a process. And when she was covering that story, it is just like a lot of tears that comes out of it, like, oh, she told me that something major would happen. Sorry. Sorry, I don't want to be so emotional, but you know, yeah, she told me that something major would happen to me, and now it's just unfolding right in my eyes, and I really can't wait to watch that documentary.
Neither can we. Thank you so much. I think this says it all. There is so many stories behind the label, and it's so. Okay, I will try to say one last question. Two, actually, because I promised to speak, and we are over time, but we will take that. I hope it's okay. Christian media, just very short, and then I want to say takeaways from all of you. And I was thinking of what stories do we lack? What would be the stories you would like to do, or read, or participate in? First, very shortly about Christian media. Tell us about your aim and your work.
Oh wow! I'll be super brief because I'm very emotional. So, Creation Media is a BIPOC trans refugees organization and asylum seekers in Sweden, and the ED. And the reason why we have it is that even here in Sweden, it is hard for us to fit in any community. It's really difficult to integrate in this country. Like, oh my goodness, it takes a lot of like resilience to get to your feet and stuff like that. And so for us, starting Creation Media was to have a family. I keep mentioning that it's not just an organization, it's a family where we meet and grow and empower each other and look out for each other and look for opportunities that probably we don't see outside there. So it's like a form of just going back and waiting to know that, oh, I have a chosen family and this is what we are trying to create.
What was the question again?
Question: what stories would you like to be see? Would you take part of? Make?
It's easy.
Or
Purity stories. no, that's easy.
You took my answer there. No, but I think your story there just it shows that responsible journalism makes a difference. You can make journalism that has just devastating effects, and you can make really good journalism which displays the wonders of life and the beauty of living, I'd say. I hope everything will turn out really well. When can we see? So your family story, will that be in the documentary that is coming out then? Okay. And do they have a time for the premiere or?
I am not sure, but I think probably maybe next year. Yeah. So yeah.
We are so looking forward to this. A big thank you to all. I have learned so much and I have so much feelings inside. Thank you, thank you, thank you.